I've made a severe and continuous No, we're not doing that. I did not want to have to make this one at all, but you deserve to know the truth. I won't review the 7th episode of Rings of Power. Seems that I was wrong when I had said that I would have the strength to do a video for every episode. Let's see, check script. I just cannot point out the same mistakes for every new installment of the show. To once again describe the fact that all who were consumed by such a massive flow of burning ash should have their skin burned off, their bodies frozen in a solid case of drying rock, and lost beyond all hope of coming home. That Halbrand's story arc is just a lesser version of Elasar's coming back, reclaiming what was lost. No longer can I bear to re-explain that this is not how any great volcano could erupt when water flows into its magma core. Much less could it precision bomb a grove of fruit 100 leagues removed, which now we know the Harfoots use for food. But furthermore, I simply do not want to talk about the fickle minds of Nori and her kin, who seem as yet unable to decide if they should keep this man or send him on his way. Why should I any longer entertain this show, one so devoid of sense that those who once defended it from every jab have now at last begun to trade their thoughts, to study where and how this thing went wrong? What more is there to say about our poor dejected Elrond and his friend, the Prince of Dwarves? What would I even say about Galadriel, the orcish elf, the one so unrefined, so crude, and so unlike the elves we've always known, who finds herself ungrounded in a story which, so far as we've been told, was hers, that now, at last, she tells us more about herself in this 7th episode. For though it seems that Celeborn was lost to her, so small a part he played within her life, that our dear writers thought it best to put his mention here, so far away from where this all began, that only the insane could siphon this as motive for her story, so long derailed from what it should have been, and from this grow in sympathy for her. It's almost like these scenes are here to mock the fans, who know how marvelous a story it would be to see the fullness of their strength among the Noldor in their journey through the mountains to the land of Loranand. So once again, the show has stripped a world so full of life and strength enough to move a heart long turned to stone. Until it now lay bare upon the floor. But now, at least, we know for sure, there is indeed a mail-shaped hole within her life, and one could say it's begging to be filled. And so, I will not talk once more about the awful dialogue, like when Elendil starts his diatribe against the elves, and brings about the single contribution that Isildur, so far, has made throughout the show. For who, in any of their darkest guesses, could have thought the man who would one day remove the ring from Sauron's hand would be so lost and insecure that he would be no more than an appendage for another man? I will not comment on the horrid line which Largo spouts upon a scene of dread when these nothing creatures burn their caravan. Besides the cringe, which makes me want to tear out hair, the only thing it does is send a brand new round of slop into our ears to feed our bored and famished minds so long deprived of wholesome food that we begin to take whatever we can get. And so, 4 Harfoots leave to find the man they sent away no longer than a single day ago. Who knows, perhaps the rest will learn to settle down and cultivate the earth, and so become the Harfoots Tolkien wrote. But also, I refuse to talk about the breaking of the lore, like when we see a Balrog long awake, awaiting any leaf to drift into his hole, so that he may destroy it with the fury of demonic fire. I will not mention all the basic problems with the plot, like how our Mr. Mare is injured from a stab so harsh he must now go to the elves to regain his strength, despite young Arendir's insistence that among the elves there are no healers known. And yet, our queen, whose sight is lost, will not be spared. I will no longer speak about the ways in which the animosity between the dwarves and elves grows more absurd the longer it is kept on screen. I will not mention how King Durin is a fool who turned away the greatest offer he will ever know, and all for reasons which the writers thought it best to never tell. I will not mention the painful fact that Durin and his father's argument is so bizarre that it is yet another scene where, once again, I could do nothing worse to it than simply playing it on screen. And tearing off poor Durin's crest was so devoid of meaning that I couldn't tell if this was meant to be a final break between the two, or if it was supposed to be no more than a mere slap upon the wrists. I will no longer speak about the fact that all the tension of this show is just as contrived as any of the most vapid soap operas ever aired. Like when we see Galadriel and Theo come to camp and once again we're made to wonder if his mother made it out alive. I will admit that I myself was hoping we would find her rotting corpse within the cloth. For all of this, it seems to me, is just a repeat of the comments I have made these past 8 weeks. What more could I bestow upon this great cacophony of voices which have risen up against the show? And so, although the season's end will likely once again stir up within my soul a need to scrutinize in detail all the problems with the show, for this penult I simply cannot put the effort in to break apart each line and shot with thought put into all my points, and then to edit all the clips of this disaster. And thus I leave you all with this. I hope that it will last until the end. With all of that said, though, I do need to comment on one thing in particular. That ending. You all know the one I'm talking about. So we have Jon, who I'm still counting on dying at some point in the future and will be very disappointed if he doesn't, talking about how Adar is the new Lord of the Southlands. Then Adar sits down and says, "No, that is the name of a place that no longer exists," which logically demands the follow-up question, okay, so what are we going to call it? And so he begins to look up to the corner of the screen like he knows he's being filmed, and the orcs all start chanting, "Adar! Adar!" over and over again. And I kid you not, for those who haven't seen this episode, the camera literally pans up, and we are shown the Southlands fading away and the word Mordor being burned onto the screen in its place. This show is making me goofy. Okay, so much like the rest of this video, I shall pass over just how clunky all this dialogue is and how it feels like they filmed this portion because the writers thought it would be cool to have the name drop in there. But then it seems like they went back and thought, wait, now we forgot to have him actually say it, and so they put this in at the last minute. Now, a minor lore point, which I actually don't blame the show for not getting, is that Mordor was likely already called Mordor long before the orcs and Sauron began to occupy it, since Orodruin was already frequently erupting. Based on the show, it seems like Orodruin hasn't really erupted, or at least it isn't thought of as an active volcano by the people of the Southlands. So to a certain degree, it does make sense that they wouldn't call it Mordor until after they pulled the whole water stunt last episode, and yes, I'm still angry about that. The larger sin here is the fact that they kept the name Orodruin, which is Sindarin for Mountain of Fire, which doesn't make sense if it wasn't going to be an active volcano before this. I think the larger problem with the scene, though, is that it's just so goofy and out of place. In addition to the clunky dialogue, there's the simple fact that this reveal has literally no meaning to anyone in the show outside of something like the country which has the single most generic and least interesting name in existence getting a name change. I'm sure you all remember how a common complaint with The Rise of Skywalker and other J.J. Abrams films is that he's more concerned with having the characters say things which are meaningful to the audience rather than meaningful to the characters, and this is no different. The name Mordor has basically no meaning to these people, especially considering how absent Sindarin is from the show. And this is made all the worse by the fact that it's something which isn't even revealed in the context of the universe. But you know what makes it goofy more than anything else? The fact that doing this reveal this way is completely out of sync with the visual aesthetic the show has set up. Rarely has the show used an on-screen title as a means of revealing new information to the audience, and when it has done this, it's usually only done so for establishing shots, and usually for elvish locations. Southlands. If they really wanted to have this Mordor name reveal in this episode, and they didn't want Adar himself to say it for some reason, what they should have done was go to the map they keep presenting and show the name of the Southlands change to Mordor. That would have at least made it feel like all the map scrolling we've done throughout this season had a little bit of a payoff. But no, it was apparently too much to ask that this show get even the most basic ideas of cinematic storytelling right. Forget it. Anyway, episode 8 review will be out sometime in the future, probably not soon. Sorry.